Someone was stunned after listening to what you said. Don't scroll, listen to this because your heart needs this right now. This message is for you. Before you move on, pause for just a moment because what you're about to hear may explain a feeling you've been carrying without even realizing it. There are moments in life when a single conversation quietly changes everything. Not because the words were loud. Not because anyone planned for them to have such power. But because they came from a place so genuine that they reached a heart that had been closed for far too long. This is one of those moments. Somewhere, someone walked away from a conversation with you carrying thoughts they never expected to have. They smiled on the outside, but inside, your words continued echoing long after the conversation ended. Listen to this, because your heart needs this right now. Sometimes people are not changed by grand speeches. Sometimes they are changed by simple honesty spoken at exactly the right moment. It seemed like an ordinary day. Nothing about the morning suggested that anything unusual was about to happen. You spoke the way you always do, without trying to impress anyone, without rehearsing every sentence, without knowing that someone was paying closer attention than you realized. You answered a question. You shared a perspective. You spoke from experience instead of pretending to have all the answers. To you, it was just another conversation. To the other person, it became something they would replay in their mind over and over again. They weren't expecting your words to challenge them. They weren't expecting to see themselves differently because of something you said. Yet that's exactly what happened. Don't scroll, because your heart needs this right now. As the conversation ended, they quietly walked away. Outwardly, nothing seemed different. They continued with the rest of their day, smiled during meetings, responded to messages, and carried on with familiar routines. But inside, something had shifted. Your words had reached a place they rarely allowed anyone to touch. They kept remembering the calm confidence in your voice. You weren't trying to win an argument. You weren't trying to prove you were right. You simply spoke with honesty, and honesty has a remarkable way of disarming defenses that force never could. Listen to this, because your heart needs this right now. Later that afternoon, they found themselves replaying one particular sentence you had spoken. It wasn't complicated. It wasn't poetic. It was something simple about choosing peace instead of pretending everything was fine. The more they thought about it, the more uncomfortable they became, not because your words hurt them, but because they recognized themselves inside them. For years, they had convinced themselves that staying busy was the same as being fulfilled. They confused routine with happiness. They mistook silence for strength. Yet your perspective quietly exposed the difference. They realized they had been surviving instead of truly living. This message is for you. Perhaps you've underestimated the impact your kindness has on people. Maybe you've assumed your encouragement goes unnoticed because no one immediately tells you how much it mattered. The truth is that some of the most meaningful conversations never receive instant recognition. People often need time to understand why certain words stayed with them. Seeds are planted long before anyone sees the first signs of growth. In the same way, sincere words often continue working in someone's heart long after the conversation has ended. Don't scroll, because your heart needs this right now. As evening arrived, the person who had listened to you sat quietly alone. The television played in the background, but they barely noticed it. Their thoughts kept returning to that conversation. They remembered the way you spoke about resilience. They remembered how naturally you described choosing integrity even when it wasn't easy. They remembered your belief that people are never defined only by their worst mistakes. Those ideas challenged beliefs they had carried for years. Instead of feeling judged, they felt invited to become better. Listen to this. Because your heart needs this right now. They opened a notebook and began writing questions they had never dared ask themselves before. Am I living according to my values? Have I been honest with the people I care about? What would change if I stopped making decisions based on fear? Every answer led back to the conversation they had with you. They realized you had not given them all the answers. Instead, you had given them better questions. Sometimes that is the greatest gift one person can offer another. This message is for you. There was a time when you also searched for clarity. You learned through difficult seasons that peace isn't found by controlling every outcome. It's found by becoming honest with yourself, accepting what you cannot change, and courageously changing what you can. Those lessons shape the way you speak today. Even if you don't always recognize it, your experiences have become a source of wisdom that others quietly notice. Don't scroll, because your heart needs this right now. The following morning, they woke with the strange feeling that life could not continue exactly as it had before. Nothing external had changed, yet their perspective had. They noticed how often they avoided difficult conversations. They recognized how frequently they hid behind distractions instead of addressing what truly mattered. Your words had become a mirror, reflecting not only who they had been but who they hoped to become. For the first time in a long while, change no longer felt frightening. Remaining the same did. Listen to this, because your heart needs this right now. Throughout the day, little reminders appeared everywhere. A stranger's kindness. A meaningful quote. A quiet moment of reflection while looking out a window. Each experience seemed connected by the same message: authentic change begins inside the heart before anyone else can see it. The conversation with you had not solved every problem in their life, but it had awakened something they thought had disappeared, the belief that transformation was still possible. This message is for you. Continue speaking with kindness. Continue choosing honesty over performance. Continue encouraging people without expecting immediate results. You may never fully know whose life is being influenced by your words. The conversations you consider ordinary may become turning points in someone else's story. Your compassion, patience, and willingness to speak sincerely can travel much farther than you imagine. Don't scroll, because your heart needs this right now. By the end of that unforgettable day, the person who had been stunned by your words reached one undeniable conclusion. They had entered the conversation expecting another ordinary exchange. They left carrying a completely different understanding of themselves. Your honesty had not embarrassed them. It had awakened them. Your calm confidence had not intimidated them. It had inspired them. Most importantly, your willingness to speak from the heart reminded them that genuine strength is not found in pretending to have everything together. It is found in the courage to live truthfully. As night settled in once again, they whispered a quiet promise to themselves: tomorrow, I will begin making choices that reflect the person I truly want to become. They didn't know exactly where that promise would lead. They only knew they could no longer ignore what had been stirred inside them. And that is why the conversation wasn't the end of the story, it was only the beginning. In the next chapter, you'll discover the unexpected decision they made less than 24 hours later, and why the ripple effect of your words reached farther than either of you could have imagined. Don't scroll, listen to this because your heart needs this right now. This message is for you. Less than 24 hours after that unforgettable conversation, something inside the other person refused to return to the way it had been before. They woke up expecting yesterday's emotions to fade, believing the impact of your words would slowly disappear beneath the responsibilities of another ordinary day. Instead, the opposite happened. The more they tried to focus on work, errands, and daily routines, the more clearly they remembered everything you had said. It wasn't just the words themselves that stayed with them. It was the peace behind your voice. You didn't speak to impress anyone. You weren't trying to win approval or prove you had all the answers. You simply spoke honestly, and honesty has a way of reaching places that polished speeches never can. Listen to this, because your heart needs this right now. The most powerful conversations are often the ones that seem ordinary while they are happening but extraordinary when they are remembered. As they drove to work that morning, they found themselves turning off the music halfway through the journey. Silence suddenly felt more valuable than distraction. They wanted to think. They wanted to understand why one simple conversation had unsettled them so deeply. They replayed every sentence they could remember. They recalled how naturally you spoke about choosing peace instead of constantly chasing validation. They remembered your quiet confidence when you said that real strength comes from telling yourself the truth before expecting anyone else to understand you. Those words echoed through their thoughts again and again. For years, they had built a life around appearances. They measured success by achievements, schedules, and the opinions of others. Yet after listening to you, they began asking themselves a question they had avoided for far too long. If everything looks successful on the outside, why does my heart still feel restless? This message is for you. Perhaps you've also experienced seasons where your words seemed unnoticed. Maybe you've wondered whether your kindness mattered because no one immediately thanked you. Maybe you've questioned whether speaking honestly was worth the risk when silence would have been easier. Listen to this, because your heart needs this right now. Never underestimate the influence of sincerity. People often carry meaningful conversations with them long after they have forgotten the details of ordinary ones. Your authenticity may become someone else's turning point without you ever realizing it. Don't scroll, because your heart needs this right now. Around lunchtime, something unexpected happened. A coworker asked the other person a simple question: "You seem different today. Is everything okay?" Normally they would have smiled and answered automatically, "I'm fine." This time they paused. For a brief moment, they considered giving the same familiar response. Instead, they quietly admitted, "I've been thinking about something someone said yesterday." Those words surprised even them. It was the first time they acknowledged that your conversation had genuinely affected them. Their coworker smiled and replied, "Sometimes one honest conversation changes more than years of advice." That sentence stayed with them for the rest of the day. Listen to this. Because your heart needs this right now. The afternoon became a season of quiet reflection. While everyone else hurried through meetings and deadlines, they noticed how often people spoke without really listening. They realized how many conversations revolved around appearances rather than truth. Then they remembered something else you had said: peace isn't pretending everything is perfect. Peace is no longer pretending. Those words landed differently now than they had during the conversation itself. They recognized that they had spent years performing happiness instead of pursuing it. This message is for you. Think about how much you've grown through your own experiences. There was a time when disappointment shaped your outlook. There was a time when unanswered questions consumed your thoughts. Yet every challenge slowly taught you something priceless. You learned patience. You discovered resilience. You found confidence that no longer depended on constant reassurance from others. Those lessons didn't simply change your life, they changed the way you speak, encourage, and understand people. That's why your words now carry a quiet depth that cannot be faked. Don't scroll, because your heart needs this right now. Later that evening, the person sat alone at their kitchen table with a notebook in front of them. They weren't planning to write anything important. They simply wanted to organize their thoughts. Yet as soon as the pen touched the page, one sentence appeared almost effortlessly: what if the life I've been building isn't the life my heart truly wants? They stopped writing and stared at those words. The question felt frightening because it demanded honesty. It challenged routines they had accepted without question. It invited them to examine choices they had never before been willing to question. Listen to this. Because your heart needs this right now. One by one, they began writing down the beliefs they wanted to leave behind. I don't have to pretend I'm okay all the time. I don't have to measure my worth by other people's approval. I don't have to stay where I have outgrown. Each sentence felt like another weight lifting from their shoulders. They realized your conversation had not given them a new identity. It had simply reminded them of the person they always hoped to become. This message is for you. Continue speaking with compassion. Continue choosing honesty even when it would be easier to remain silent. Continue offering encouragement without expecting applause. Some people will forget your words by tomorrow. Others will remember them for the rest of their lives. You cannot always know which conversations matter most, so let every conversation reflect the kindness and wisdom you've gained through your own journey. Don't scroll. Because your heart needs this right now. As the night grew quiet, they looked back over everything they had written. A sense of gratitude slowly replaced the confusion they had been carrying. They whispered softly, I thought yesterday was just another conversation. I didn't realize it was an invitation to change. Those words filled the room with unexpected peace. For the first time in years, they stopped blaming circumstances for the emptiness they felt. They accepted that genuine transformation begins with personal responsibility. Listen to this, because your heart needs this right now. Before going to sleep, they made one simple promise: tomorrow I will take one action that reflects the truth I've been avoiding. It wasn't a dramatic promise. It wasn't about changing their entire life overnight. It was about taking one honest step instead of another comfortable excuse. Every meaningful journey begins exactly that way. As they turned off the light, your conversation echoed one final time through their thoughts. They finally understood why they had been so stunned after listening to you. It wasn't because you revealed a secret about their life. It was because you quietly reminded them of the truth their own heart had been whispering all along. And in the next chapter, that single promise they made before falling asleep will lead to an unexpected decision. One that surprises everyone around them and proves that one genuine conversation really can change the direction of a person's future. Don't scroll, listen to this because your heart needs this right now. This message is for you. The promise they whispered before falling asleep was only one sentence, but it carried the weight of an entire lifetime. Tomorrow I will take one action that reflects the truth I've been avoiding. When morning arrived, they lay awake staring at the ceiling, realizing they had reached a crossroads. It would have been easy to forget that promise. It would have been easy to convince themselves that yesterday's emotions had simply been temporary. But something had changed too deeply for that. Your words had become more than a memory. They had become a mirror. Every time they tried to return to old habits, they saw a reflection of the person they no longer wanted to be. Listen to this, because your heart needs this right now. Real transformation begins the moment staying the same feels more uncomfortable than taking the first uncertain step forward. As they prepared for the day, they noticed how automatic their routine had become. Every movement felt familiar, yet something inside them refused to operate on autopilot anymore. They stood in front of the mirror longer than usual, asking themselves a question they had avoided for years: am I living honestly, or am I simply living comfortably? The answer arrived without hesitation. Comfort had slowly replaced authenticity. They had learned how to appear confident while hiding insecurity. They had learned how to stay busy so they would never have to face difficult emotions. They had learned how to avoid vulnerability by convincing themselves they didn't need anyone. Yet one conversation with you quietly exposed everything they had spent years trying to protect. This message is for you. Think about your own journey. There were seasons when life forced you to ask difficult questions. Perhaps you wondered why certain relationships ended. Perhaps you questioned whether your kindness had been appreciated. Maybe you carried disappointment longer than you wanted because answers never arrived when you hoped they would. Yet those seasons refined you. They taught you patience when you wanted immediate clarity. They taught you resilience when giving up seemed easier. Most importantly, they taught you that your identity is not built upon another person's ability to recognize your value. Those lessons now shape every encouraging word you speak, even if you don't always realize it. Don't scroll, because your heart needs this right now. Throughout the morning, the person who had been stunned by your words began making small decisions differently. They apologized to someone they had unintentionally ignored for weeks. They thanked a coworker whose efforts they had quietly taken for granted. They chose to listen during conversations instead of waiting for their turn to speak. None of these actions seemed dramatic. No one around them recognized that anything extraordinary was happening. Yet inside, every small act felt like another step away from the version of themselves they no longer wanted to become. They finally understood that genuine change rarely begins with grand gestures. It begins with ordinary choices made consistently. Listen to this, because your heart needs this right now. During a quiet break in the afternoon, they found themselves sitting alone outside. A gentle breeze moved through the trees while people hurried past without noticing the beauty surrounding them. Watching strangers rush through their day reminded them of something you had said: sometimes we're so busy chasing tomorrow that we forget to fully live today. At the time, they smiled politely without thinking much about it. Now those words carried an entirely different meaning. They realized how many important moments had slipped through their hands because they believed there would always be another opportunity. They had postponed conversations. They had delayed gratitude. They had hidden emotions. Suddenly they understood that tomorrow is a gift, never a guarantee. This message is for you. Perhaps you've also begun appreciating the quiet moments more than you once did. Maybe you no longer measure success only by achievements but also by the peace you carry inside your heart. Maybe you've discovered that the strongest people are not those who never struggle, but those who continue choosing kindness even after experiencing disappointment. That wisdom didn't arrive overnight. It was earned through seasons that tested your patience, challenged your confidence, and ultimately revealed your strength. Don't scroll, because your heart needs this right now. Later that evening, the person returned home and opened the notebook where they had written the night before. Instead of making another list of fears, they wrote a new title across the top of a blank page: "The Life I Want to Build." Beneath it, they slowly filled the page. I want relationships built on honesty. I want conversations where no one feels the need to pretend. I want to become someone who expresses gratitude before it's too late. I want courage to become my habit instead of my exception. Every sentence reflected the quiet transformation that had begun after listening to you. They smiled softly because they finally understood something important. Your conversation had not changed their circumstances. It had changed their direction. Listen to this. Because your heart needs this right now. As they continued writing, another realization quietly surfaced. They had spent years believing confidence meant never admitting weakness. Now they understood that true confidence allows honesty to exist without fear. They no longer wanted to impress people with appearances. They wanted their character to speak louder than their image. That shift changed the way they viewed every relationship in their life. They began asking themselves whether the people around them encouraged authenticity or simply rewarded performance. It was a question they had never considered before, and it reshaped the way they looked at their future. This message is for you. Continue protecting the peace you've worked so hard to create. Continue choosing integrity even when shortcuts seem easier. Continue speaking words that bring hope instead of fear. You may never know how many hearts quietly carry your conversations long after you've forgotten them. The impact of sincerity cannot always be measured immediately. Sometimes it takes days. Sometimes months. Sometimes years. But truth has a remarkable way of remaining alive inside people until they are finally ready to respond to it. Don't scroll, because your heart needs this right now. Before the evening ended, they looked back over everything they had written during the past 2 days. The notebook had become a record of transformation. It began with confusion. It continued with reflection. Now it was filled with purpose. They realized they no longer wanted to be remembered as someone who almost lived honestly. They wanted to become someone whose actions reflected the values they claimed to believe. That decision filled them with a quiet determination stronger than any emotional excitement could have produced. As darkness settled outside, they closed the notebook and whispered a simple prayer: "Give me the courage to become the person my heart already knows I can be." The room fell silent, but inside they felt a peace they had not experienced in years. They finally understood why they had been so stunned after listening to what you said. It wasn't because your words gave them a new dream. It was because your words awakened the dream they had buried beneath fear, routine, and self-doubt. And as they drifted off to sleep, they had no idea that within the next 24 hours, one unexpected encounter would test everything they had learned. In the next chapter, the courage inspired by that conversation will meet a real opportunity, and the choice they make will reveal just how deeply your words changed not only their thoughts, but the direction of their entire life. Don't scroll. Listen to this because your heart needs this right now. This message is for you. The real test of any life-changing conversation is not what happens while the words are being spoken. The real test begins afterward, when no one is watching, when the excitement fades, and when ordinary life quietly asks whether those words will become actions or remain only inspiration. Your conversation had already stirred something deep inside the other person's heart. Now life was about to give them an opportunity to prove whether that change was real. Listen to this. Because your heart needs this right now. Every meaningful transformation eventually reaches a moment where courage must replace comfort. The next morning began with an unexpected invitation. A colleague asked if they would like to join a meeting involving an important project, one they normally would have accepted without a second thought. Yet something felt different. While everyone else focused on schedules, deadlines, and achievements, your words continued echoing through their mind. They remembered you saying that success without peace eventually becomes another form of exhaustion. At the time, they simply nodded politely. Now those words refused to leave them alone. They realized they had spent years chasing accomplishments while quietly neglecting the relationships, values, and moments that gave those accomplishments meaning. They accepted the meeting, but for the first time, they entered it asking not, "How can I succeed?" but, "How can I remain true to myself while succeeding?" This message is for you. Think about how your own life has changed through difficult seasons. There was a time when you believed every opportunity had to be accepted, every expectation had to be fulfilled, and every person had to approve of your choices. Yet experience slowly taught you something much more valuable. You learned that saying yes to everything often means saying no to your own peace. You discovered that healthy boundaries are not acts of selfishness but acts of wisdom. Those lessons shaped your voice. They gave your words a quiet authority that comes only from lived experience, and that authenticity is exactly what reached another person's heart. Don't scroll, because your heart needs this right now. During that meeting, something surprising happened. A discussion turned toward honesty and accountability after a mistake affected the entire team. Normally, the person who had listened to you would have remained silent, allowing someone else to speak first. This time they calmly admitted their own part in the situation. The room became unusually quiet. Nobody expected such openness. Instead of making excuses, they simply accepted responsibility and explained what they had learned. Far from weakening their position, their honesty earned unexpected respect. As the meeting ended, one coworker quietly said, "I wish more people had the courage to speak the way you just did." In that moment they realized your conversation had already begun changing the way they lived. Listen to this, because your heart needs this right now. Sometimes courage does not look dramatic. Sometimes courage is admitting a mistake. Sometimes it is apologizing without defending yourself. Sometimes it is choosing truth when appearances would be easier. The person who once measured strength by control now understood that real strength is built through humility. They no longer feared being seen as imperfect. They feared living a life that never reflected who they truly wanted to become. This message is for you. Perhaps you've underestimated how many people quietly observe the way you live. They notice your patience during difficult moments. They notice your willingness to encourage others without expecting recognition. They notice the calm confidence you carry after surviving seasons that once threatened to overwhelm you. Even if they never say it aloud, your example often speaks louder than your words. People are drawn to authenticity because so much of the world rewards performance instead. Don't scroll, because your heart needs this right now. Later that afternoon, the person took a different route home. They weren't trying to avoid traffic. They simply felt drawn to slow down. They parked near a quiet park and sat on a bench watching children laugh, older couples walk hand in hand, and families enjoy simple moments together. Looking around, they realized something that stopped them completely. The happiest people didn't seem to be the busiest or the wealthiest. They seemed to be the people fully present with those they loved. Your words returned once more, the richest life is measured by peace, not possessions. They smiled softly because, for the first time, they understood exactly what you meant. Listen to this, because your heart needs this right now. As the sun slowly began setting, they opened the notebook that had become their companion over the last few days. Instead of writing fears or regrets, they wrote a question across the top of a blank page: who do I become if I stop living from fear? The answers came one after another. Someone who tells people they matter while there is still time. Someone who chooses forgiveness over resentment. Someone who listens before speaking. Someone who values people more than appearances. Every sentence reflected the quiet transformation that had begun with one honest conversation. This message is for you. Never believe that your kindness is ordinary. Never assume your words disappear the moment a conversation ends. Sometimes the encouragement you offer becomes the very thing another person carries through their darkest season. Sometimes your honesty gives someone permission to stop pretending. Sometimes your compassion reminds another heart that change is still possible. These moments rarely make headlines, but they quietly change lives. Don't scroll, because your heart needs this right now. That evening, they received a message from someone they hadn't spoken to in months. It was brief, asking how they had been. Before, they would have answered with the usual response, "I'm doing great." Instead, they replied honestly. They shared that they had been reflecting, growing, and learning to live more intentionally. The conversation that followed became one of the most meaningful they had experienced in years. They realized honesty creates space for genuine connection, while perfection only creates distance. Once again, your words had shaped a decision they never would have made before. Listen to this, because your heart needs this right now. Before going to sleep, they reopened the notebook and read every page from beginning to end. They could clearly see the progression. The first pages were filled with confusion. The next pages carried questions. Then came responsibility. Now the newest pages overflowed with purpose. The notebook had become more than a journal. It had become evidence that one conversation truly can redirect a person's future when the heart is willing to listen. This message is for you. Continue protecting the peace you fought so hard to build. Continue choosing honesty over appearances, compassion over pride, and wisdom over impulse. Never stop speaking from the heart simply because not everyone understands you immediately. Some people need time before the truth fully reaches them. Seeds planted with kindness often bloom long after the conversation has ended. As the lights went out, the person whispered quietly into the darkness, "I don't want this change to last for only a few days. I want it to become the way I live." Those words carried a different kind of confidence, not the confidence of someone who believed they had everything figured out, but the confidence of someone finally willing to keep growing. They no longer saw your conversation as a coincidence. They saw it as a turning point. And while they drifted peacefully to sleep, they had no idea that the very next day an unexpected reunion would place everything they had learned into one defining moment, a moment that would reveal whether the transformation inside their heart was truly ready to shape the future waiting just ahead.